and the Immaterial. I'm absolutely delighted we have Olaya Sanfuentes, who is Professor of History at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, so has come from Santiago de Chile to join us today and tomorrow. Over to you, Olaya.
Well, thank you. I need to say two things before. First, thank you for inviting me, Ivan and Sarah. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful. I'm sorry for my English. I hope that you are patient enough to listen to me. As it says here, I'm interested in nativity scenes used for Christmas celebration in Santiago de Chile. The sources that I found are from the second half of the 19th century. The general goals that I have in my paper are to interpret these objects and suggest some of their uses, because I have seen that the nativity scenes have the power to activate many performative practices which make these objects more powerful than they appear. Through these objects, we can articulate a whole description of the long Christmas time, which begins the 16th of December with the prayer of the novena, 9 days that pray for the Christ child, and that ends at the middle of January. Well, the other goal is to recover a description of the celebration through interdisciplinary perspective. You will see that the sources are very miscellaneous, so I need a lot of perspective, and to save gaps and lack of information through some assumptions. The methodological tools that I'm working with are art history methodologies. First, iconography, because I have seen that we have the three main characters of the nativity scene, Mary, Jesus, and Joseph, that are taken from the canonical gospel, but then we have some characters taken from the apocryphal gospel, the three wise men, the shepherds, and then we have a great varieties of popular characters taken from popular imagination, and that's where the historical theme is focused, because it gives the possibility that in every time and in every social and geographical context, the nativity scene can be put in a scenography. And then I have realized also that performance studies are very good tools to understand the performative actions that I see described in the chronicles. The different historical sources that I found are photographies, Chilean craft used today and used in the 19th century, objects at museum, written description of contemporary nativity scenes, descriptions of practices around nativity scenes, canvases, engravings, popular songs, newspaper information, and traveler testimonial. All these sources can tell you the importance of the nativity scenes and the Christmas celebration in Santiago, at least for the 19th century. I will show you some of these. And the hypothesis is that through interdisciplinary methodologies and focusing on the possibilities of performance studies, we can reveal ways of doing that originated in the past. The ritual is resignified and has the ability to give us information about history and identity. Each description of a performative action is a potential source of memory of past eras. And I want to show you all the visual material that I have, because it is from this visual material complementary with the chronicles that I have made this hypothesis. Well, this is a nativity scene from Ecuador that it was the source of imports in the 19th and 18th century from Chile, and it is in a museum now, so it's not in use, but it used to be a very huge nativity scene. These are the main character, but they are surrounded by all the other popular characters. This is a photo taken from a 1970 catalog, so I don't know where this nativity scene is right now because it is from a private collection, but it can also show you the Ecuadorian origin of the objects. Another one. And this is a unique picture because it is a popular nativity scene from the beginning of the 20th century. And, well, this is the 2 point. Here you have the main characters, but all the things surrounding shows the importance of the mountain. That is something very typical. And all the crafts and popular objects that surround the nativity scene as gift of the different person who goes and kneels in front of the nativity scenes with their best intention. This is a historical picture also of the Alameda, which is the Santiago Central Boulevard, where different commercial stands sells this craft for to be sold, and the children bought this little craft, and they gave us as a gift to the Jesus Christ for Christmas. These are the Chilean craft from the beginning of the 20th century, but they inherited the techniques and all the methodological tools of the craft made by the nuns of the 18th century. This is a typical guaso, a Chilean horseback rider. Here you have another one. Oh. These are the typical scenes, popular, that surround our environment, rural environment. And those objects inherited the technique of this object. These are from the 18th century, 19. And the other one are from the beginning of the 20th century. But it's because one of the nuns went out of the convent, and she taught other women how to make this ceramic. Well, this is a canvas from the late 19th century, and it can show you also the scenery of the mountain, the children kneeling in front, and all the women. This is a thing more of women and children. The festivity in the street, having wine and all kind of alcohol, is more for men. No, it's real. Here you have another one. And you can see this character that is typical of nativity scenes, both in canvases and in ceramic, and it's a girl who plays the harp. You can see here a lot of men having fun with the alcohol stand. It was a popular celebration. It was not private, not elitist as it is now in Santiago, but it was absolutely in the public space, all the people together. This is in the newspaper. Here you have again the harp. Oh, it's not working. And to make some assumptions, I have used similar objects in Europe and other parts of Latin America. For example, this nativity scene from Cuenca, Ecuador, that has the same composition. Or this in Naples, where you can see also the mountain and all the popular characters surrounding the scene. Here you have a detail. And all the popular characters with their gift for Jesus. And as a conclusion, preliminary conclusion, I can say that performative practices helped to maintain the stability of the groups that had a familiar script upon which they could act every year. Performative actions as agent of social cohesion. each person and each group had the chance to be represented in the nativity scene, and they could act in front of the objects, playing the role of their own character. So this is a belonging feeling that helped the people to be part of the scenery. And traditional and popular Christmas representations, as well as performative practices, tend to be very similar in their essence throughout Christian world. So that is, for me, one of the most important things, because makes nativity scene an object of historical present and historical problem.
Thank you, Olaya. And you were actually a minute, which is... That's wonderful. So I think this, the material and the immaterial, the examples that David and Olaya have given us will, I'm sure, lead to lots of questions and comments. Peter.
I'd like to make a brief comment on the central concepts of both papers. So I love the introduction of enchantment into the conceptual repertoire of historians. I just wondered whether the complementary opposite, disenchantment, might not be useful on occasion. I'm thinking of the miraculous image of Our Lady at Walsingham, exposed in the 1530s by some Protestants, showing that the apparent agency of the image was actually the agency of people, the monks, manipulating the image behind the scenes. And about the case of the Natividades, I thought I'm interested in your use of the concept of performance, because this seems in some ways the opposite of the way in which one normally approaches material culture in performance. But I mean that I'm used to thinking of people making use of physical objects to construct their identities, status, and so on. So the person is in the center and the objects are just instruments. But your example, this is the first time I've come across that, the object is in the very center. I wouldn't say it's manipulating people, but it's stimulating the audience around. So the relative importance of the two in this case has been reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a fun point you make about disenchantment. It's key. It's a little bit like iconoclasm. But as someone once said, when you smash an idol, make sure you keep the pedestal, because you'll get use out of that for the new idol you put in its place. I like that idea, and I think that's exactly what the Protestants did. They shifted, they disenchanted something, but they enchanted something else, which is their experience of the Bible, this precious book that they fetishize and fondle and read with a pulpit voice. And they animate the book. Even today you can find evangelicals, very common evangelical practice of divination, by opening the book suddenly and pointing, and wherever your finger lands, that's what God's telling you. So if that's not enchantment, I don't know what is.
Well, thank you very much for your comment. Indeed, I feel that the nativity scene is in the center of everything. First, numerically, because every chronicle and every picture you see from the 19th century celebration, you see the nativity scene. And then I have seen a lot of description of the things that people do around the nativity scene. For example, mother make a pedagogical script for their children. They say, for example, this character, and Cain did that with Abel, and I have found chronicles where children said that they wanted to, for example, steal some things from the nativity scene because they thought that they were very, very spectacular and somebody was looking at them. Then I know that they danced in front of the nativity scene. They played some theater dramas. They sang. it was the best plan to do for families during the celebration. They went from one church to another and from one house to another. So the autopoiesis, the relationship of one person with another it was ejected by the nativity scene. So everything started to be articulated when they began to see these things.
Next, Melissa, and then Henry.
It's a question about nativity scenes. I worked on nativity scenes in Naples. And,
Wow.
and,
I needed some.
one of the problems, of course, is trying to reconstruct displays. So that's one of the most immaterial things actually about the objects, is you've got these objects, but in fact we don't have the evidence of the display, and it's very difficult to sort of try and reconstruct that. And the other thing that I was going to say is that the I should just forgot what I was going to say. About belonging, sorry, and about performance. So, I mean, you've told a story which is very much about public displays and nativity scenes, and there are, in fact, public displays and nativity scenes in Italy, but in fact, one of the things the Neapolitans, of course, are doing are making their own nativity scenes. In fact, what's part of belonging is actually making these things, so taking the heads, buying the wire bodies, and then making them, whether they're at court or sort of farther down the social scale. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about making, the making.
Yeah, I have a lot of that description in my paper, and all the times that they invested in making that, in harvest the herb, and making the little figures, and asking their children to give their own gifts. So the belonging is not just social, but family also. It's a familiar, yeah, you're right.
So it's kind of trying to connect with this sort of
absolutely, you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Henry.
Olaya, muchas gracias.
Hi.
My question is about your list of sources. One of the things that was missing from me was performance. That is, your engagement with the performance of these nativity events. So it's an extension of Melissa's question about reconstructing not just the nativity scene, but the space that it's within, and then how people are interacting with those scenes. So my question is, and you'll know why I'm asking this, is did you participate in many of these creations and performances, and what did you learn from it?
I'm super happy that you asked that, because one of the reasons that I chose this topic, it is always a coincidence also, but it is because we don't do it anymore. And we used to do it when I was a child. I remember being part of this drama. I'm talking about 40 years ago. I wasn't the virgin, not the child, but I was a observer. But we don't used to do that anymore. And in other parts of Latin America, the nativity scene is still part of the identity of the celebration. And I'm very sad that we're not doing anymore. We have received much more American influence, so we have the tree now, and it doesn't have any sense for me. So I'm sorry, but because we lost a tradition that it was very part of our identity, it was very important for us of being Chilean, because I remember having those Chilean crafts inside my nativity grid. I don't have mine now in my own family, so I'm glad that you asked that, because Chile, at least in the urban environment, has lost this tradition, not in the rural one.
Marla. And then
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask you a question, David, about this idea of enchantment and how you might see it in terms of objects that are not seen. Because a lot of the most powerful objects that people have in their midst, I'm thinking primarily of the work I know from African objects that are the most sacred and the most powerful, they're not seen. They're held in secret, but they accumulate enchantment partly through their invisibility, but their visibility to just a smaller network of people. And I wonder if you could say something more about that.
That's fascinating. Is there a theatrical component in which their presence is alluded to in ritual or festivals?
Well, I think people know that they're there,
Yeah.
and they have assigned ritual specialists who are the ones allowed to engage with the objects, but
So then the people connect with the specialist.
the people connect with the notion that there's someone that's managing the power that will impact their lives.
Yeah.
And so, but the objects are the thing that is the source
You
of
could
enchantment.
you could say the same about relics. Most, at least many people, don't get to see the actual relic. It's enclosed in a reliquary, or it's on a shrine that you can't quite get to. So that would be that's not always the case, but that would be another instance. It would be fascinating, I think, in that case to track the physical contact through different actors. The priest who has access, then the ritual performance that ensues when the priest alludes to that, or in some sense distributes its power through the theatrics of the ritual, the performance of the ritual. Yeah. But there has to be a connection, doesn't there? Otherwise, some kind of material connection. Otherwise, its power is lost.
Or it's the knowledge that it's there and your inability to see it that gives it.
Yeah, but you have to enshrine that. You somehow
Right.
have to materialize its absence in order to have access to it. Yeah.
There's also the whole question of vulnerability. One only has to think of Hugh of Lincoln biting off Martin of Tours' finger, the sacra forta, the sacred theft, to get a relic for your own institution, your own church. Dan?
I'm glad you brought up iconoclasm, David. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the relationship between iconoclasm and disenchantment. Because, as many people have pointed out, there's nothing more enchanting than to break something, because you acknowledge its power.
Mm-hmm.
And then the related question, we talked about this a little bit earlier this morning, is this point that James Simpson has made about how the museum itself is iconoclastic. So when you put a nativity scene in a museum, you've actually destroyed its power by virtue of rising above it, you looking at the scene rather than experiencing the scene, except that when we put it on a slide, we fetishize it in an academic way, and perhaps it gets re-enchanted again.
And re-enchantments have taken place in galleries. There have been wonderful stories about icons being displayed, and people who come, who are devout, who don't project the protocols of aesthetic museum experience, but see Our Lady and bow and kiss and violate all those rules about not touching the powerful, the valuable object. So enchantment is always a kind of a cloud of ideas and practices that one projects, and as is disenchantment, because I don't think the temptation for us as scholars is to assume that iconoclasm is an empty act, but it's not. It's part of a larger project, and you alluded to it yourself. Right? When you break something, it can be interpreted as a way of diverting its power or destroying its power in the interest of replacing it with some other regime of power.
Last question in this section goes to Peter.
Very quickly, I wonder if we can speak about an enchantment cycle. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about Native American objects in museums today, where very often, I know this is true in Laurel's here, in natural history, the objects are ritually worshipped. So there is a life to them that goes through.
Right, right.
And there is another
Shrines, too.
scenery I want to answer you. For example, in Spain, there are a big congregation of people who make nativity scene, and they use it, but they feel so proud of them that then they put it in museums. So where's the enchanting here?
Good. Well, thank you very much, David and Olaya, for addressing the material and immaterial. Thank you very much. So our second pairing in this session on the symbolic concerns the sacred and the profane. And we have, to address this in the first instance, I'm very glad to say we have Colleen McDowell, who is Professor of History and Sterling M. McMurrin Professor of Religious Studies at the University of Utah.